In May, I'm going to be playing the First Violin Concerto of Sergei Prokofiev with the Philharmonia Orchestra. It's a lovely thing to do because, there's many reasons, but whoever programmed it to happen in May, I think, did a great job because it's a piece that somehow sounds like spring. It's one of those perfect violin concertos. There's Szymanowski Concerto No. 1 that kind of feels like it's using all the sort of magic capabilities of a good violin. There's the Mendelssohn Concerto that sort of feels like it just grew out of the instrument. Like most Mendelssohn sort of feels like it was just born perfect. And then there's Prokofiev 1. He had a very clear, very original idea of what the instrument is about. It kind of feels like that a lot of the violin playing traditions of maybe the second part of the 20th century are kind of working a little bit against this piece, because this piece is kind of like butterflies and sort of colored lights and like sunrises and good smells. But of course we're playing in concert halls for like 2,000 people at a time. And violins are being adjusted to make more sound, to kind of fill the big spaces. And you sort of end up with a sort of more muscular sound and more projection, but this piece is kind of, most of it feels like you should be whispering it. The first performance marking is that you're dreaming or sleeping. It's kind of like the first song of Pet Sounds by Beach Boys ends with the lyrics, sleep. Good night, sleep tight or something. Anyway, it's like they're saying good night. So everything else that happens after that in the album Pet Sounds is a dream. At the risk of sounding a bit cheesy, I think it's sort of the same thing. So when you start, you get this is the violas, and then you go. Now we're in a living room, so I can play it like that. In a concert hall, nobody would hear it if I would play it like that. So I have to, but that's kind of the expression that I would love to have. So what needs to happen is for me to figure out how to make it sound like I'm going to sleep in front of 2,000 people in a fairly loud way. It's such a wonderful piece. It really kind of floats my boat. I have an older brother who is also a violinist, and when we were growing up, he would always play the pieces that I wanted to be playing sort of 2 years before I stood a chance against those pieces. And this was definitely one of those things. My brother and I, when we were really little, we saw a commercial on Eurosport, like just a sort of station identification thing where they would have car crashes. And they had timed the car crashes against from Romeo and Juliet. So we thought that Prokofiev must be kind of great when he wrote perfect music for car crashes. Then later on, we got a chance, both my brother and I, to play in the Sibelius Academy Symphony Orchestra for a run of performances of the Cinderella ballet. And we were kind of used to the are really dark undercurrents of Romeo and Juliet. It's really sort of meaty and juicy and raw, most of that music. I think I have this theory that even if you have never heard of Romeo and Juliet, when you hear the beginning of Prokofiev's score, you know that this is not going to end so well. So then we heard Cinderella and played in it with my brother, and this is all like, bing! It's really bright lights and fairy tale music in a completely different way. And so we were like, wow, so he can write this kind of stuff as well. And so we kind of, I think both of us, we sort of developed this weirdly kind of bipolar idea of who he is as a composer. So on one hand you have Romeo and Juliet, the Second Violin Concerto, the F minor Violin Sonata, and so on and so on. Then on the other hand you have Cinderella and the D major Flute Sonata that became a Violin Sonata as well, and the First Violin Concerto. And I'm not enough of a Prokofiev expert to tell you what was going on in his life, and what might have been the reasons for this kind of division of voices in this kind of couplings of pieces. There's something in this language that he uses in the First Violin Concerto that just kind of really feels like the right thing for me. It's packed with highlights. I remember when I was little, when I was hearing my brother practice it for the first times, there was something right at the beginning that I sort of couldn't believe. Hold on. Yeah. This is like, you expect Frank Sinatra to sing this sort of music, this sort of harmony changes, but it's a Prokofiev Violin Concerto. These pieces were performed to great success by David Oistrakh, who is one of these real kind of violinists. I have a hard time finding any colleagues that would not admire Oistrakh in some ways, but he doesn't do always exactly what's written in the music, sort of articulation-wise or character-wise. For example, his dreaming sound is much more concrete than what my dreams sort of tend to be. And there's some like tempo changes, things like that Prokofiev didn't mark in the score, but Oistrakh would do. But we know that they knew each other, so they must have been somehow sort of blessed or sanctioned by Prokofiev, whatever Oistrakh chose to do. But I'm kind of trying to wipe the dust off my own way of playing the piece a little bit now, to go back closer again to what's actually in the score, and kind of trying to wipe out the editions or kind of printed interpretations of various fiddle players who have worked on it, and whose sort of bow strokes and characterizations have been immortalized into different editions of the piece. There's something about the pacing of the piece and the structure of the piece that invites any listener willing to experience a little bit of magic to kind of go into that place where you are just getting extremely well-timed impulses from the stage, but most of the magic is happening in your head. You might see mechanical chickens, or you might see all sort of different singing birds. You might see a choir of cats, the hunters from Peter and the Wolf. Or there could be like a really, really sort of intense love story in there somewhere. There might be a young violinist practicing scales in his apartment, and the lady downstairs kind of using a broomstick to try to silence the annoying violin playing. So it's not a piece that will make you sort of scream and jump out of your seat at the end, because there's a very tense moment a few minutes before it ends, and then the most beautifully organized unfolding, unraveling of the tension. It kind of goes out quietly and beautifully the same way it came in. Yeah, it's magic. It's a slowly unfolding magic trick. No, it's basically every measure, every page, every idea in the piece would be worth its own TV program and set of books and an app. But yeah, you'll just have to come and listen to it. Anyway, are we done? More or less?
I think so.
Yeah, you have a lot of editing to do, but that goes with the territory.